I just realized my mic was muted the whole time. But anyway, but I want to go ahead and get into it. So if you didn't hear anything that I said, let me go ahead and start back over. I just want to make sure that as you guys are coming in, understanding that, hey, I understand you had a interesting Sunday, and so I want to go ahead and jump right into it. So you see the title: Are you still working in your passion, or has it morphed into a job? Are you still working in your passion, band directors, or has it morphed into a job? So let's get right into it. So I've talked to a lot of band directors and things of that nature, from a lot of different places, a lot of different areas and aspects. And a lot of them have some great things to say. And a lot of them have some very interesting things to say. And a lot of times I just sit and listen, right? And so it kind of goes back to one of the conversations that we had when we were having Talk That Talk. So let's really rewind it all the way back. You go to your 4-year university, right? And in your 4-year university, whatever reason why you decided that you wanted to go to that 4-year university, as whatever the university you made a decision that you wanted to be a music educator. You made a decision that you wanted to be a band director. That's what you did. Somebody inspired you to be able to do this, right? And to do that job. So you get into the job and you love music and you go through all your courses. Every course that you have to go through, whether it's an arranging course or an applied course, you go through the whole process, right? Then you step out there on the market. And I'm not going to talk about the market as far as how the market looks, whether you're on a low income area, whether you are in a non-urban community. I'm not even going to talk about that. What I am going to talk about is when you step inside of your position and you start that position, it seems great. Whether you are in that position that you were always dreaming of, like I always say, that 5A school, that 6A school, that where it almost seems close to perfect, and you are operating the way you always dreamed of operating, you got your staff and blah 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 blah, right? Or you may even walk into that position where it doesn't have all of that, all of those things set up, right? But you're hungry and you want to be able to move a program forward and move in the vision that you actually have for your specific thing that you're doing. You want to be able to see that vision carried out. And so you grind and you grind and you grind, right? And you go through that whole process. Years go by and you may have success, right? But then question, what about life? Life. When life happens and when life hits you, right? You start a family, you have kids, and 5, 10 years have passed or whatever, and you start growing a family, and then the job looks different. Things change in education, right? So let me go back. Let me ask you this question, or let's look at this for a second. Right now in education period, in education period, right? We're having a shortage of teachers, right? In Texas alone, a recent survey found 1 in 4 teachers were considering leaving the profession following the 2020-21 school year, which in general, on average, in the general population before this past school year was an average, I think, of 1 in 6. Mario let us know even on the last show that we had that I think it was 120 positions need to be filled in New Jersey. So teachers itself are burnout, right? And let's go back to this thing called burnout. We left in the year of last year, COVID, right? A lot of us ended school late and turned back around 6 weeks later for a lot of people, especially here in Texas, right? A lot of people turned back around and was right back into the profession. A lot of us weren't able to release. A lot of us weren't able to decompress. Some of us were still feeling burnout when we walked into the classroom. But we had to put on a face and we had to make it seem like everything was okay and we would be just fine, right? So are we still operating in our career? Are we still moving in that idea that we had when we were fresh faced out of college? Or is it just a job? Think about it. Let me go back to the scenario that I gave you. As a matter of fact, what I'll do is this. I'll tell you my story. When I finished college, I was ready to go. Started teaching in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, and it was nothing, absolutely nothing I wouldn't do for those kids and for that band program. I would stay up hours and hours and hours, whether it was writing music or whether we were with the kids because we had to take them home, blah, 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 right? And then I left there and I ended up going to Beaumont and I did the same thing. My energy was on 1,000, 1,000. I was ready to go to the middle school. I was ready to work at the high school. I was putting in the work. I'm going to grind. And a lot of people come into the profession feeling the exact same way. That they are hungry and they want to be able to push this thing forward. But 10, 15 years go by and then all of a sudden education changes. People have families, people have lives. And then we start looking back and we start looking at our situation and we're wondering, are we still doing this because of the vision that we had? Are we still doing this just to be able to get a paycheck? Just to be able to say that we are surviving? And I say this all the time. My thought process is this: I refuse to kill myself. I refuse to kill myself when I know the work that I'm putting in, I'm not getting paid my worth. Think about that, band directors. Especially high school band directors, right? And I always tell this. I'm always going to say this. I'm always going to talk from the perspective of a Texas band director, right? Because I don't know what happens in Mississippi. I don't know what happens in Alabama. I don't know what happens in Louisiana. I don't know what happens in DC. So I'm not going to talk about that. But what I will talk about is the perspective coming from a Texas band director, right? The expectations of what people have for Texas band directors. Because let's be real, right? In the state of Texas, football, band. Band is huge. And so when we come into these professions or when we walk inside of the classroom, the first thing that they want to say, make sure that you are doing is moving towards the UIL, making sure that UIL is a number one priority. And for a lot of us, especially in the high school sector, they want to make sure that there's a band on that field every Friday, which is supposed to happen, right? It's supposed to happen. You're supposed to make sure that you have a band on that field every Friday if you're a high school band director. But my question is, if you're burnt, if you're overworked and underpaid, do you see that vision that you had when you were fresh out of college? I see so many band directors who go through this process and they work their bones. They work their tails off. There's gray hairs, there's stress, there's body aches, there's back aches. Everything is going against you. You have the students who are going against you, right? And then next thing you know, we get a band out on the field and then they do well, right? And then we say, "Oh man, it was worth it." Really? It was really worth it? When you get home, if you have a family, when you get home to your family and everybody's asleep because you went to band practice almost every day. You've had this game and now you go home and now you have no energy. And then you wake up in the morning and you say, "Am I doing this for the check? Or am I doing it because I still have a vision about my career?" What does that career look like? And this isn't a personal thing that I'm asking. I'm asking you, right? Those who are watching. What does that career look like? Where's the growth? Are you operating in your purpose? Are you operating in the space in which you always wanted to operate? Are you saying that are you in that position or that space that puts you where exactly where you thought you were gonna be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, fresh out of college, 15 years ago, 20 years ago? If you pull up to your job, if you pull up to your band room, if you wake up in the morning and you say, "Ugh, I gotta do this again," then you need to ask yourself, am I still operating in my career or am I operating because I gotta make sure I have a check to come home to? That's something that you gotta ask yourself. We're burnt out. We're tired. And then I can give it from another perspective. My man Quan talks about or has brought up before the willing vessel, right? You can be hungry to teach, but what about the willing vessel within the classroom? If you don't have a willing vessel, do you realize how much more stress that puts on you? Because now you not only have to be band director, you have to be salesman. Because you already know if you're a band director and you're out there and you're watching this right now, right? If you're a band director and you're out there, you already know that you have to already be a lot of things on top of everything, right? You have to be money management, counselor, principal. You have to do all these things. But now, because you don't have willing vessels, now you have to be a salesman. And then the question becomes all of this I'm giving, am I getting this in return? Are you paying me my worth? Am I even happy doing it? Yeah, you turn around and you see performing kids on the field, and that's great. But are you fulfilled on the inside? Are you truly fulfilled on the inside? Do you wake up every day and you say, hey, yo, real talk, this is great. I can't wait to get to school. I can't wait to get, and there are people out there, and I'm not saying that this applies to everybody, right? But what I'm saying is look into yourself and ask that question. Because if you have to wake up and you have to dread getting up, going into the school, then you got to ask yourself that question. Am I still operating in my career? Or I just got to keep doing this just to know that I got that check coming every month. But then what do you do? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm off, right? Somebody tell me. In the chat, I just put up the link. Come hop on and tell me maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you have a different perspective. Let's talk about it, right? But what if you are operating? What if you aren't operating your career? What if you are operating your job? A lot of people ask that question, right? Because I've had this conversation with a couple of band directors out there. What's next? How do I transition if I need to transition? Because there's no security out there. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I really think, and this is my personal opinion, right? And this is why I have this. It is my personal opinion that there are way too many people out there who feel these things and don't say anything about them. We sit here and we keep quiet and we kowtow. Why? Because it's our job and this is what we're supposed to do and blah, 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 blah. I just don't believe that. I think that if we get enough people who actually are making some noise and want to make some noise and shake some things up, I think that we can make things happen. I think that we can make these changes. We shouldn't have to regret going into our jobs. Because let's be real, we got into the profession because we wanted to make beautiful music and we wanted to touch kids. Not in that way, by the way. I need to make sure I pause. We we wanted to make a connection with kids as it relates to music and give them the same joys that we felt when we were younger, right? But there's so many other obstacles in the way. 9 times out of 10, we're doing 10% of the thing that we dreamed of doing and 90% of the things that don't even apply to the job that we always thought of at least. So how are we fueling our passion? We're fueling our passion with 10% of the things that we're doing? Then that means we're empty vessels. That means we're not fulfilled. And that to me is a problem. As music educators, heck, as educators, what can we have to give to students, to our students if we're not fulfilled? We're just going on fumes. And there's no and I don't even know, right? Because I don't know everybody. I don't know everybody's situation, and I'm not going to try to act like it. But I truly believe, earnestly believe, within my heart, there is no way that there are band directors out there who just say, I don't really care. Every band director that I know, whether they're in a low socioeconomic area, whether they're in a Title One school, whether they're in a good economic area, they all want to be great. They all want to be able to make an impact. But the question is, are we in positions or are we in a space to where we can actually fuel these things? There are people who wake up every day in professions and say, man, I love what I do. But I've watched and I've seen band directors who get up and say, I don't know if I need to go in today. But then they realize I got to get the check. But like I said, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm off. Maybe you're watching this right now. You say, man, this dude tripping. Put it in the chat. I put the link up there. Cam up. Let's talk about it because I really believe there are a lot of people out there who feel that. And a lot of people who are just going by. Really, really, really just going by. Especially in today where we're coming off of COVID. And let me really talk about that. This coming off of COVID thing. I'm looking at a lot of programs who are doing a really good job. So kudos to those people who are out there really doing a good job. But a lot of programs took a hell of a hit. A hell of a hit. And a lot of directors are burnt. And really, they're just trying to hold on because we're not even going to talk about the House bill. Like next Sunday, we'll talk about House bill, right? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll talk about it next Sunday. But it's a lot going on right now. Students have to be caught up because they're behind in education and data and numbers. And we're still told that we have to have a functioning band program. And we're still taught that told that we have to build numbers. And we're still being told that we have to make sure that the kids are developing. And there are a lot of people right now who are struggling with those things because of the fact that they have kids being pulled out of their classes because their last test scores show that they're not where they're supposed to be. Where are you gonna find the kids from? Some of the kids that's in your program right now haven't really played an instrument in the last year and a half. And operating on all of that, and there's more stuff too, but operating on all of that, and you have a teacher who still hasn't really recovered from the burnout from the prior year. Are we operating in our career? Are we fueling our passion? Are we just going to the check? And see, I'm not one of those kind of people who are going to sit up here and say all of that without asking this one question, because my thought process is I want to make sure that the information is out there and the thoughts are out there, but I also want to ask this question: how do we make change? What do we do to make change? What suggestions do you have? If you're watching right now live, what suggestions do you have? Because there is a way. There's a way to change it all. There's a way to make change. And it doesn't always, and the thing is, sometimes the way I look at it, right? I want to go back to that idea of the willing vessel. Sometimes when I look at it, sometimes we got to look at our communities. Sometimes we got to talk to the people in our communities. We got to look at culture. Yeah, as band directors, we have a big part to play too. I'm not going to sit up here and lie, but we also have to think about our communities and our culture. And we need to know our communities and our culture. But in knowing our communities and our culture, what are we doing as directors to connect? I went to uh NAFME. We had a webinar with Dr. Constance McCoy, and it was talking about culturally responsive teaching. And typically, when you talk about culturally responsive teaching, the funny thing is, and I brought this up during our webinar, is that we generally talk about it when it comes from continent to continent, right? We're always talking about, you know, Western music or Western culture, and then, reading music or bringing in music from Asia or, Africa or things like that. But one of the questions that I posed is, what about culturally responsive teaching right in our own communities? Are we connecting to our students? And we had this conversation on the show. What are we doing to connect to our students? What are we doing to make it easier, slightly easier on ourselves? Right now, when we think about, and like I said, I only speak about Texas. Right now, when we think about UIL, the pressure of UIL, and for a lot of people, it is pressure. For some, it may not be, right? But can you still learn a quarter note, or can you still play or learn how to play, or a student learn how to play a half note if they're playing something that connects to them? Or do we have to play hot cross buns? Kids don't know what hot cross buns is. Sometimes we got to find a way to make our jobs a little bit easier. And sometimes that way is connecting to our students. Now, there's another half of that. Yes, there's a job that we must do, but there's another half of that though. When we think about, if we're actively moving in our careers, right? And if we're fueling our passions, does half of the problems that we have to deal with administration? Does half of the issues that we have to deal with how administration views music education and band as a whole? Because in a lot of people with a lot of people that I've communicated with, that tends to be the problem. The administrators don't understand what we as directors go through. Listening to Mario talk, it was very interesting that he was having all of these problems and situations by himself. by itself. Please explain to me. And if there's somebody out there who's an administrator, or if there's somebody out there who understands or gets or understands the administrative side, I need to know this one question. Why is it that I know the answer to this question, but it still doesn't make any sense to me? Why is it that there are band directors that have no help? None. I don't care if you have 40 kids, 30 kids, 20 kids, 100 kids, 150 kids. Listen to me. You ain't gonna do that job without an assistant principal. Period, point blank. You're not gonna tell a football coach to go out there and have no assistant coaches. And it makes no sense to me that you have band directors out there who have absolutely no help. None. And they always want to say, oh, well, the numbers, the numbers, the numbers, the numbers. Yeah, I get it. The numbers, right? But we're also talking about human beings here. And I think more administrators also need to be educated on what happens inside of the band room. Now, the one of the greatest things that I have seen is there have been a lot of band directors who become administrators. And so because of that, it helps to push the band director, or it helps to service the band director in some type of way. But there are not enough. Band directors' tanks are on empty. And like I said, it's not everybody. It's not everybody. There are some people out there, man, who are doing a hell of a job. There are some people out there, man, whose complaints and grievances, I'm gonna be honest, are minor. But there are some people who wake up every day dreading. And the question is, because one of the thing is, there are a lot of people who are like, hey, if that's you, then you shouldn't be doing that job. And there's a school of thought that they may be correct. But then there's another thing. There are people out there who feel that way, but just don't want to feel that way, but circumstance makes them feel that way. So how do they get out of that? You can't just say, well, you should find something else to do then. I don't know. I don't always subscribe to that. Sometimes the situation just puts them in a position where they feel that way. They didn't go to school for 4 and 5 years to just feel that way. Now, should more universities prepare students? Yes, because the reality is that education has changed over the years, that music education within itself has changed over the years, and we have not moved forward in music education when it comes to the university level to support what has happened in music education as it stands now. That is a whole different argument. My thing is, and don't get me wrong, that is a necessary argument. But my thing is this: we have got to find a way to fuel our passion again. And that doesn't mean just leaving the profession. Are we fueling our passion? Or are we just getting a check? Has our passion turned into a job? I sit back and I think about my band director all the time when I was in high school. And I was in high school, so right, so like I didn't know him personally, like I didn't know what he dealt with, blah 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 blah. I'm never gonna act that way, but I've always wondered what he felt like when he pulled up to the band room. What was going through his mind? Because I look and I compare it to what I've seen over the years from friends of mine, and I wonder, is it the same? I don't know. But are we fueling our passions or is it just a job? All right. I appreciate you guys for sticking with me. Um, if you want to get in real quick, you have the availability to. I'll put the link one more time in the chat. And if you want to get in and have the conversation and talk about it, or air your personal air your personal complaints and grievances, and talk about if you are yourself fueling your passion or it's just a job, by all means do it because people need to hear these voices. People got to hear them. And that doesn't mean that we're just having a big gripe session. That doesn't mean that we're having a pity party. That doesn't mean any of that. I think the thing is, there are a lot of people, and I said this earlier, there are a lot of people who suffer in silence. There are a lot of people who just do it because they say it's supposed to be done and it is what it is. I don't know. I just can't subscribe to that thought process. I don't subscribe to it is what it is. I think everything has a solution that we just haven't found. Next week, next Sunday, I want to talk about House Bill 4545. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and look it up. But House Bill 4545 is really, really interesting in how it's affecting Texas music educators. And within that conversation with House Bill 4545, I'm also going to talk about these PTech programs. Okay. Because along with House Bill 4545, especially nowadays, um, when we're coming off of COVID, and you'll understand that in a minute, or you'll understand that next week. When you're talking about the PTech program along with House Bill 4545, there are a lot of directors who are scrambling right now. There are a lot of directors who are trying to figure it all out. And don't get me wrong, they're successful and they're being successful, but I want to be able to have a conversation about it. So next week we'll talk about House Bill 4545 along with the PTech program. But I want you to continue to ask yourself this question: are you operating in your passion or is it just a job? Are you operating in your passion or is it just a job? Sometimes when you and I want to leave on this. Sometimes when you're operating your job, that doesn't mean you're getting paid what you're worth. Time time is money. Are you getting paid what you're worth? We'll talk about it next Sunday. Until then, I will see you guys on Wednesday. Talk that talk. It's gonna be fire. I got a lot of good topics coming up. So we'll see you guys on Wednesday. I appreciate you guys hanging with me. We'll see you guys on next Sunday.